Everybody, my name's Bryson. I'm president here at the John Locke Foundation. Welcome back to an in-person poll presentation. We haven't done this since February of 2020, and so we're excited to have people back in here. Yes, thank you. Applause is good because you're applauding yourselves for coming and having lunch, which is great. You're eating the Lord's chicken, which is always good, and everything's going to work out. But no, we do these regular polls all the time here. It was a product of the Civitas Institute, and we still do it here at the John Locke Foundation. And we're excited to bring this product in. Happy to have our guest commentator today. So I'll go through the preliminaries of the poll, and then we'll talk about the poll. This is the Civitas poll. We kept this brand up. This was a survey of likely general election voters done May 21st through 22nd. We do have some gun questions in this poll we'll get to later. I want to go ahead and preempt you and let you know that this happened before the shooting in Texas. And so that didn't weigh into what voters were thinking of at that time. We do always have a guest commentator for the polls. Our guest commentator is Dr. Chris Cooper, Western Carolina University. He is the Madison Distinguished Professor of Political Science and Public Affairs and the Director of the Public Policy Institute at Western Carolina. And he came all the way from Cullowhee. What's that, a good 5.5 hour drive?
About 5.
Yeah, about 5. You made it. But he's got to be in Richmond tomorrow, so we got him halfway there. Living on a, sorry, I'll go on. If you would like to live tweet, and this is being live streamed as well on our Facebook and YouTube channels, if you would like to live tweet the poll presentation, Dr. Chris Cooper is at Chris Cooper WCU. He kept it pretty simple. You are at the John Locke Foundation, which is at John Locke NC. I'm Donald Bryson at Donald Bryson. I was even less imaginative than Dr. Cooper. The poll was performed by Signal Polling. They are at Signal, CYGNAL, and we use the hashtag Civitas poll on the poll. All right, the poll itself was 600 likely 2022 general election voters, May 21st and 22nd. It has a margin of error of 3.95% with a 95% confidence interval. That means that if we did this poll 19 out of 20 times, it would, if we did this poll 20 times, 19 out of those 20 times, it would fall within that 3.95% margin of error. People always want to know, well, how did you poll these people? We did a mixture of live calls, text polling, as well as email invitations. That's something that we've started doing within the last 15 months at Civitas. This poll used to be only live caller, but now, how many of you in here have landlines at your house? And there it is. All right, I'm one of those people too, but not many people do, and we want a more diverse variety of people answering the poll. So let's get into the poll, unless Dr. Cooper has any preliminaries. I think the theme of this poll, and you and I talked beforehand, is that voters are either really confused or really nuanced, or both.
Yeah, there's some head scratchers here, and I'm kind of curious to hear what folks in the audience have to say about this too, because I think there's a few that we're still kind of working our brains around.
Yeah, they are. But we start off with the political environment. Let's talk about that. We asked people, generally speaking, would you say things in the United States are headed in the right direction or off on the wrong track? 72.8%, and I think that's the highest I've ever seen it, say wrong track. 21.5% say right direction, with 5.7% being unsure. Generally speaking, people have been more pessimistic than optimistic for the last little while, and that goes back even to 2020 and before, but that's a really high number.
Yeah,
Cooper?
It's a really high number. So obviously Republicans were a lot more likely to say that we were on the wrong track than the right track, but also thought it was interesting that Democrats were split almost right down the middle, right? So this is not that all Republicans think we're on the wrong track and all Democrats think we're on the right track. So I think some people could say, well, maybe this is a proxy for opinion of Biden. I don't think it is that. I think it's something different, and I think different people hearing this question are probably primed to think about it in different ways.
They do. Democrats are split 44-45. 2020 Biden voters are split 44-46. Those aren't necessarily the same people. That's very telling. As for the largest voting bloc in the state, unaffiliated voters are 78% wrong track. All right.
And those are, just to jump in, the unaffiliated voter, that's from voter registration file, right? That's not for self-report. So sometimes you see these polls and people say, I'm an independent, and you'll see these kind of reported out as unaffiliated, but these are actually true unaffiliateds.
That's right. So the unaffiliated Democrat, Republican labels are from the voter file. People self-label later on in the poll on moderate, liberal, conservative. And in North Carolina, people say that they're conservative, and then they're, we'll see. We go to the state generic legislative ballot. Obviously, you can't do a statewide poll on legislative races since they are in a specific district. But just generally speaking, when you go and vote for state legislature, you're going to vote for a Democrat or a Republican. That's the question. Republicans have a lead and have had a lead for the last little while in this poll. That is strange. That has not been historically true in the Civitas poll. Even leading up to the Tea Party wave in 2010, Republicans were down 2 or 3 points in the generic ballot on the Civitas poll, and then we saw this happen. Democrats have a historic voter registration lead, still maintain a voter registration lead to Republicans, and so you typically expect people are going to say Democrat on a statewide generic ballot test, but you see Republicans are up 48.5% to Democrats at 42.8%. The absolutely I'm voting for a Republican is at 41.8%, which is almost dead even with the I'm either am or I can be persuaded to vote for a Democrat. What do we make of this?
You know, I think we're going to see this and then a few others that are kind of different measures in some ways of general mood, like partisan mood. And we do know that there is a general partisan mood. And I think every one of these, this one and the others we're going to see, suggest what we would expect. This is going to be a good year for the Republican Party. How good, obviously, still remains to be seen. The details of the races are going to matter, but by and large, it's going to be a better year to be a Republican than a Democrat.
Yeah. You see we always talk about the gender gap. Oh, look, I've got a laser.
Hey.
We talk about the gender gap, and just generically, females tend to prefer Democrats and males prefer Republicans. That's just a generic statement. But the gap on males from Republicans to Democrats is much larger than the 3-point gap with females from Democrats to Republicans. Not sure what to say about that other than that's significant.
Yeah, no, I think that is significant, and it's important. And we're going to talk later about some abortion questions and the degree to which gender matters there versus partisanship. But I think here, yeah, clearly that's an important thing to point out.
Yeah. All right, then we do a generic ballot question for congressional races. We now have 14 congressional districts in North Carolina. We say, and regardless of how you would vote at the state level, if the general election for U.S. Congress were held today, would you vote for the Republican candidate or the Democrat candidate? Republicans uptick a little bit here, up to 50%. That is a majority of people now saying that they're going to vote for the Republican candidate. Democrats at 42.5%, undecided at 7.4%. I'll make another note. We can't poll third-party candidates because you don't always have a third-party candidate in all of the congressional or legislative races. Inevitably, I have a Green Party or Constitution Party person who's really upset they're not on this question, but that's why. But anyway, we get back to it. You see Democrats are at 42.5%, 7.5 points behind Republicans at 50%.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is another one of these kind of general questions that I think taps into general partisan mood. You know, this doesn't mean it's going to map on to election results in this way. Obviously, we all know that, you know, certain districts are going to lean certain ways. This was right after the primary ended, if I remember right, when this was conducted.
Right.
Like a lot of folks probably still don't know who's running unless it's Bo Hines. They got that mail. But otherwise, I'm not sure they know who's running. But it's a good measure of general partisan mood at this point in the cycle.
It is. Again, looking at the gender gap, females prefer Democrats by 3 points. That lead in males jumps to 20% here, and that's significant. But I want everybody to remember that 50% number because that'll come up in the conversation again here in just a moment. We do the Senate race, and this is the one everybody wants to know about. We asked the question, if the general election for U.S. Senate was held today and you had to make a choice, who would you vote for? Even though that is not grammatically correct because we had a preposition at the end of the sentence. Just work with me. We polled all 4 candidates. We didn't just do Republican, Democrat here. There's a Green Party candidate and a Libertarian in this race. You see Ted Budd up 43.6% to Sherry Beasley's 41.8%. The Green Party candidate, the Libertarian candidates aren't meeting the margin of error just yet, but there are people who are saying they're going to vote for them. Don't forget that 50% number. You see Ted Budd is actually lagging about 6.4 points behind the generic Republican on the generic ballot.
Yeah. I think that's notable. I mean, look, it's noticeable. It's notable to me anyway that the best poll I've seen for Sherry Beasley comes out of the John Locke Foundation. I don't know what that means, other than I think it's a well-conducted poll, honestly, and
there it is. Put that on tape. Okay.
But really, I do mean that, and mean almost everything I say. But yeah, I mean, this is a good poll for Sherry Beasley. I mean, you can look at this and say Ted Budd's up a little, but really they're within the margin of error, right? This is as close to a statistical tie as you can find. 12% undecided. I hope a lot of people's eyes are going to that right side of the screen and realizing pretty quickly that we talk about the lack of undecided voters. There's not a lot of them left, but when they matter a whole lot. And I think this is a great example where who they still need to reach could determine who wins this race ultimately. And I think this is also pretty interesting to see 12% undecided in an environment where neither major party candidate had a single debate during the primary season. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out with their general election strategies.
Yeah, I want to talk X's and O's on this question with you a little bit. There's a few different things going on. First off, you see Ted Budd leads. We have Charlotte, Central, Raleigh, Durham, Coastal. Those are television markets, right? And so Coastal includes the New Bern, Greenville, and the Wilmington television markets. Charlotte and the West is Charlotte and that hodgepodge of television markets out in North Carolina. I mean, if you're in Murphy, North Carolina, you're watching the Chattanooga television market, right? So people some things out of Asheville and some things out of Atlanta. But anyway, you see Ted Budd leading in all of these, except for the Raleigh-Durham market. If you're Ted Budd's campaign, what would you do here? Do you run up the score in the other markets? Do you double down and try to mitigate her edge in Raleigh-Durham? What do you do?
I think part of that Raleigh-Durham is just simply partisanship, right? And so this is, if you thank goodness you don't do this. We put people to sleep even quicker. But if you were to do kind of a bigger statistical test, you get Andy Taylor in here to run a regression for you. And I think you're going to find that effect probably disappears in the face of partisanship. So I think really partisanship is really what's driving a lot of that. And for the folks in the West, we will take slight offense at being grouped together with Charlotte. As a matter of fact, our member of Congress was accused of going Charlotte recently, and I think that was meant as an insult. So
I saw that. That was a mailer, right?
Yeah.
He's gone Charlotte. Everybody says gone D.C. or gone New York, gone Charlotte. That's a new one for me. And my name's Bryson. Like I have roots in Western North Carolina. My next question about this race in particular is. Sherry Beasley didn't really have a competitive primary. There were some candidates there, but it wasn't nearly to the competitive level that we saw with Ted Budd. Do you think that, I guess I'm letting my own bias be known, but do you think that the Democrat Party or other campaigns did her a disservice in not running her harder before the campaign? People think of campaigns as sort of this on-off switch, but you really have to ramp up.
I'll say, I don't know if it was a disservice or not. I was surprised. I was surprised she didn't take the opportunity where she's not going to get hit very often at all and get her name out there a little bit more. She's taken a different strategy. Clearly her strategy was lay low, accumulate as much money as she can and be ready for the general, not say anything that's going to get her in trouble. And she did all those things, right? I mean, she won by obviously a huge margin. She raked in a whole lot of money. And there's really not a lot of critiques that are sticking on her that are self-inflicted wounds, right? This is not a candidate who made a lot of mistakes in the primary. So whether it was smart or not smart, I don't know, but I think it was not the strategy I would have expected. I think I would have expected her to be spending more money during the primary. She finally ran that ad, I think, that had her driving down the road. I think folks saw that one. That came pretty late in the season. I would have expected kind of more, trying to get more positive coverage. As far as the Democratic Party in general investing, there was an article, I think, in Politico that was saying that the Democratic Senate campaign committee is still trying to decide where exactly they want to put money in this race. And that, I thought, was a bit of a surprise, and not that the John Locke Foundation Civitas poll is going to drive Democratic policymaking and decision-making, but if I'm the Democratic Party, I'm looking at those numbers saying this is a winnable race, and I'm going to throw some money in it.
I think it clearly shows she's within striking distance. I just wonder if she's, my personal question, that's why I asked this question, is she ramped up to strike? And I don't know that answer.
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. I mean, she's running a quiet campaign thus far. On the other hand, a quiet campaign, at least according to these, we don't want to read too much into one poll, at least according to this poll, it's working out pretty well for her. So I'm very curious to see her strategy going forward. I'm curious to see Budd's strategy moving forward. particularly since, as you pointed out, Bud is trailing the generic Republican by, not a lot, but a noticeable amount.
Right. And lucky for all of us, there's a really good organization that will continue to poll this race throughout the year, and we can keep watching it. All right. We also have other races in North Carolina this year that are statewide. We asked about the Supreme Court race. The general election for North Carolina Supreme Court was held today, and you had to make a choice between the following two candidates. Who would you vote for? There are 7 Supreme Court seats in North Carolina. Currently, Democrats enjoy a 4-3 majority. Both seats that are up this year on the cycle are both Democrat seats. You have this race, Republican Richard Dietz running against Lucy Inman. Dietz is up 43.6% to Inman's 40.3%.
Yes, right. With again, 16% undecided. In an alternate universe where we don't have partisan cues and we're voting for state Supreme Court justices, my guess is that undecided number would be much, much, much higher.
Right.
I sincerely doubt that most voters at this point, and perhaps even when it gets to the general, could pick these candidates out of a lineup, but they certainly have partisan preferences. So for this and the following, I think they are in some ways good measures of general partisan mood, that kind of big concept we keep coming back to.
Right. And, we saw massive ballot roll-off for judicial races when we didn't have partisan labels because people just don't know. I mean, you don't see TV commercials for the state Supreme Court or Superior Court or anything like that to help you differentiate between that.
I wonder if we may this time, but that's a...
we very well may. But look at this number right here on females. You have Richard Dietz at 40% with females, Lucy Inman at 44%. So like I said, there are 2 Supreme Court seats, right? So let's go to the next one. This is obviously between a male and a female. And look at there. Trey Allen, the Republican, is up 46.1%. Sam Ervin is at 39.5%, but those females have changed to 44% for Trey Allen and 41% for Sam Ervin. That's a big swing and accounts for a good portion of that lead that Trey Allen has.
Yeah, that's right. And this one is not, the last, I believe, is still within the margin of error. The second race is not within the margin of error. In other words, you can't really say who's up from the first. You can say who's up, at least from this poll, in the second. Again, with the undecided being a really the key to the race.
Right. And I don't want to make too much out of this, but it is unique in that there are a lot of people in this state who weren't born here. They're still new to the state. They're still new to the state's politics. And I think that one small sign of that is the fact that somebody with the name of Ervin is polling at less than 40%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable in the scope of the history of North Carolina politics.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, now I wish y'all had a code for North Carolina native, but that's for next time.
All right. Do you approve or disapprove of the job that Joe Biden is doing as president? This is a high for disapproval rating at 60.8%. A majority say that they highly disapprove or strongly disapprove of the president. 33.3%. A third say that they approve of what's going on. Democrats and African American voters express a net approval of the job he's doing, but that's soft, and that's about it on his approval.
That's right. I mean, look, this is not a good number for Joe Biden. I don't think anybody could argue with a straight face that it is a good number for Joe Biden, and this is going to go a long ways to determining the outcome of the November election, at least in some of these tighter races. We, of course, always expect the party of the president to perform poorly. That's too many P's in a sentence, but work with me. Party of the president to perform poorly in the midterm, in his first midterm. On top of that, these are bad numbers for Joe Biden, and so in North Carolina and nationally, and that's not going to bode well for Democratic candidates. With that said, it is still surprising to me that Sherry Beasley did as well as she did in this poll, given that Joe Biden is doing as abysmally as he is in this poll.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I'm just going to take a little break, and this is not about the question, but we're going to get through all the questions on the poll, and then we'll save 10 or 15 minutes at the end to take your questions. I see people's brains sort of churning through and creating questions, so we look forward to having those. The next question is, we ask about Roy Cooper's job approval rating. And this one's a change in what we've seen. We've seen Joe Biden's disapproval rating ticking up, but Roy Cooper has been seesawing back and forth, and I don't really have a good explanation for why 46.1% of people say they disapprove and 41.7% say that they approve, other than I'm guessing he's just being drugged down by national politics and Joe Biden a little bit. But for not many of our Civitas polls have had Roy Cooper underwater, and yet here he is underwater outside of the margin of error.
Yeah, he's been able to perform a pretty impressive magic trick, really, this entire time. His approval rating has looked remarkable all along. I think some of the movement, I was trying to dig in briefly into some of the old polls, it looks like, not surprisingly, Republicans are increasingly disapproving of him. If that sentence makes any sense. So I think a little bit of it is he was and still is able to get some sort of bipartisan agreement on his side, and maybe that's dwindling a little bit, which we would kind of expect as we get closer to an election. And I think voters are smart. People who take polls are smart. They know that sometimes these are proxies for, kind of who are you supporting.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I think unaffiliateds, where they go, are dead even, 43-43 on approval rating of Cooper. Oh, look, there's a note there that I made. Cooper's 1-1. Good job, Pastor Donald. Good job. All right, let's get to the issue of abortion. And I have a slide out of place there, but anyway, we asked the question, when thinking about the issue of abortion, generally, would you consider yourself pro-life or pro-choice? We gave people, well, we didn't give people this option. If they opted for it, they could, but we only read them pro-life or pro-choice. 39.7% said they were pro-life, 43.1% said that they were pro-choice. And this one, as you would expect, is all over the place.
Yeah, it is. And I think this is, to some degree, what we would expect, right? I mean, certainly, whatever poll you find run by essentially any organization is going to show, given those two options, more people are going to put themselves in the pro-choice bucket than they are the pro-life bucket. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. I'm trying to remember I don't label myself on the issue of abortion. That number was surprisingly high. I'm going to Vanna White it up here for a second. For Democrats, if I remember, yeah. So 17% of Democrats versus 10% of Republicans there. I mean, we're in very, very small subgroup analysis. Right. We shouldn't read too much into that, but that did surprise me a little bit on the Democratic side of that equation.
That's right. 23% of black voters say that they don't label themselves on the issue.
Right. And that was, you said that was not a choice given. That was, they would opt into that one?
Right. If they just said, I don't know, I don't label myself, or I'm not sure, then that's where, or unsure was something. We didn't, basically they were just read these two choices. They weren't read these two choices.
Gotcha. Interesting.
All right. How much have you heard about a draft decision from the Supreme Court indicating a majority of justices favor striking down the decision Roe v. Wade, which established the right to have an abortion? 72.2% of people said they've heard a lot about it. 20.5% said they've heard a little. 3.6% have been living in a cave, and 3.6% are unsure.
That number was a little bit bigger than I thought it'd be. Almost 3 in every 4 say a lot. I do think part of this may be, like most polls, educated people were more likely to answer this than people with less education, right? In other words, if you take the percent with a college degree in the general population, percent with a college degree that answered this question, that answered the poll, it's much higher that answered the poll. I have a feeling that's a lot of what's driving, is that you're getting engaged people that are answering a poll, educated people that are answering the poll, the kind of people that are the most likely to follow this sort of thing. So I wonder what it would look like with a slightly different sample. Still, there's been a lot of question the degree to which the leak is going to matter versus if there is an eventual decision. And I think we are seeing some of the effect today because people are aware.
The frustrating thing about doing a regular poll is that polls are finite. You have an organization that has a budget. You can only ask so many questions. Voters are only going to stay on the poll for so long. A question that I wanted to ask as a follow-up would be, where was the first place you heard about the draft leak?
Oh, interesting.
Did you hear about it on TV? Did you hear about it on the radio? Did you hear about it on social media? That's my guess for what the majority would be. Yeah. But I think that would be an interesting question to get.
It would be interesting, yeah. I wonder if people follow the rabbit hole slightly too far. I wonder how many people would accurately remember.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think where I learned. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
It seeps into me, I guess. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure mine was Twitter. Twitter's not real life, though. All right.
Thank goodness.
Majority oppose overturning Roe v. Wade in North Carolina. As you may know, this is the question, as you may know, the 1973 Supreme Court case Roe v. Wade established a woman's right to have an abortion. Would you like to see the Supreme Court overturn its Roe v. Wade decision or not? 34.2% say yes, 51.0% say no, 7.5% interestingly say it doesn't matter either way, and 7.3% are unsure.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, what we would expect to see. We know that Roe v. Wade as a concept, as a phrase, as a decision is popular. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. I mean, I hope people are starting to break into the crosstabs again. Be a little careful, because for some of these, the sample sizes can get pretty small and you can get on shaky ground pretty quickly. But amongst Republicans, 17%, 17% were no. Oh, excuse me.
That 68% for Republicans is really low compared to the 86% no's on Democrats.
Sorry, I was flipping it.
That's okay. There's a lot of numbers up there. But that 68% was really surprising to me.
Yeah.
The 86% no's on Democrats, I wasn't really stunned by. These unaffiliated numbers kind of make sense. But I don't know what that means about the state of the Republican Party. And again, this is just a poll. It's not necessarily predictive of anything, but 68% is a fairly low number for the party that is considered to be the pro-life, anti-abortion party.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. And I think as you're looking at this question too, just wrap your head around, right? We're talking about overturning. So it's a little bit of a double negative equals a positive here when we talk about Roe v. Wade.
It's true. All right. This is the fun question. When do you think abortion should be legal? And we gave them 4 options. Abortion should always be legal and there should be no restrictions. Abortion should be legal but with some restrictions, such as for minors or late-term abortions. Abortion should be illegal and it should never be allowed under any circumstances. Or abortion should be illegal except in special circumstances, such as when the life of the mother is in danger or in cases of incest or rape. Generally speaking, abortion should be legal, got 50.8%. Abortion should be illegal, got 42.1%. You and I were talking beforehand. Close to 60% of people are actually just here in these two middle. Abortion should be legal, but with restrictions or within some parameters. But very few people are actually all or nothing on abortion.
Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So if you ask people pro-choice, pro-life, they're going to give you an answer, and it's going to fall largely how you expect. You ask them about Roe v. Wade, same kind of thing. But there are ways to find more nuanced answers here. I don't know that we always see that in the political debate, and that's a stone I would cast at both sides on this debate.
Fair enough.
But yeah, there is some movement in the middle, and perhaps maybe some room for more nuanced policy.
Yeah, I think there probably is. I think my guess is, and this is not in my policy wheelhouse, it's not a subject the John Locke Foundation covers, but my guess is that the majority of the public is about where state law would be if Roe v. Wade was overturned. From a policy advice standpoint, my advice to Republicans would be, don't touch anything. Just let it go. But that's from a political standpoint. All right, moving on. Which of the following is closest to your view? Abortion should be legal in the U.S. nationwide. State governments should decide whether abortion is legal or illegal in their states. Abortion should be illegal in the U.S. nationwide, or unsure. You see 46.2% said it should be legal nationwide. State governments got 25.2%. Abortion should be illegal in the U.S. nationwide, got 24.4%. Unsure is 8.2%. From a different policy perspective, this is not a good look for federalism. Which is my concern. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's true. And the 20%, I mean, only 1 in 5 think it should be illegal nationwide. You know, like you said, there's constraints on polls. You can't ask everything, one, money, but also just fatigue of the person answering the poll. But I would love to know what people think about which states. In other words, so if I say, hey, state government should decide, what if I decide for you what your state government is going to do? Kind of curious to see in those cases what people would think, right? So it's easy to say state government should decide, and if maybe you think you know what your state will decide, but if it doesn't fit with your preconceived notions, I'd be kind of curious about that. But you're right, it's not a great look for at least desire for federalism is the way we tend to understand it.
Right. Shame. Thinking about the November 2022 elections, which most closely describes your view as you consider candidates for office? I only vote for pro-life candidates. I prefer pro-life candidates, but do not make decisions based only on that issue. I only vote for pro-choice candidates. I prefer pro-choice candidates, but do not make a decision based solely on that issue. You can see vote for pro-life candidates is at 34%, vote for pro-choice candidates is at 36%. That's within the margin of error and fairly close. 23.4%, which is not insignificant, that's nearly a quarter of voters, say I do not make my decisions about candidates based on their views on abortion. 6.6% say that they're unsure. Again, I think the thing is people are sort of in the middle here. They prefer pro-life candidates, they prefer pro-choice candidates, but they make their decisions based on something else.
I think that's right. Now, for a lot of these people, they're making it based on partisanship, and that's a pretty easy proxy, right? If somebody tells me they're a Republican, they tell me they're a Democrat, I'm going to be able to predict with a fair bit of accuracy what their stance is on abortion. So a little bit of this may be about true partisanship, and we know that people want to say they're more open-minded than they really are when it comes to their vote choice, I think. But yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think you're right. The 1 in every 4 who at least say it's about something else is a big number.
It is. It's a very large number. All right, let's talk about education, something non-controversial.
Is it 1985 again?
Right. How many of you have seen the news that there was a Parents' Bill of Rights proposed at the General Assembly this week? All right, so the John Locke Foundation has been writing about a Parents' Bill of Rights for a long time. Not the one that they proposed necessarily, although they took parts of what we proposed. But we did this next question based on what we had proposed in the policy papers that we've written on it. And we asked, it's a long question, and bless the voters who stayed on for this question. This year, 26 states have introduced a bill to expand parental rights in schools. Such legislation typically reaffirms parental access to curriculum and classroom materials and often authorizes academic and financial transparency requirements for the school. In addition, these bills make parents the primary decision makers regarding their child's health and medical decisions and provides parents with opt-out options regarding controversial surveys or age-inappropriate classroom materials. Would you support or oppose a Parents' Bill of Rights in North Carolina? 56.9% said that they would support such a Parents' Bill of Rights. 24.4% said they would oppose. 9.4% said neither. 9.2% said unsure. Dr. Cooper.
Yeah, the first one is and I have no better way to design the question. It's a nuanced policy question. It's got to be long, but
we labored over that question.
Yeah, it's a really long one, and the language is obviously pretty positive. I think if you parse the words in that very long question, again, I have no better option. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying for the average person who's getting that, kind of zone out in the middle. You're hearing a lot of positive words. It doesn't surprise me that they're supporting it. I don't believe for a second that there's huge opposition, well over a majority, but I do wonder with slightly different question wording or a different way to approach that if people would have a different opinion. I also think we were talking before that, in the way that we'll talk about CRT in a second, in the way that CRT has become kind of a code, and whether people know what it is or don't, they know where they're supposed to fall. I wonder if Parents' Bill of Rights is going to become that kind of word soon, that it is will become a word that creates partisan division just based on the phrase.
Right. And when you try to break it into an acronym, it's PBR, which confuses a lot of college kids.
That's right. That's right.
He got it. All right.
Why just college kids? What about college professors? They can get PBR?
I assume you could upgrade from PBR. So we asked this simple question. How much have you heard about critical race theory? Most have heard a lot about critical race theory. 3.7% say they've heard a lot. 26.6% a little bit. 7.3% nothing at all. And 2.4% are unsure. The unsure people always puzzle me. Like, I don't know, maybe. Did you get hit on the head this morning? Maybe. I don't know. I would say, generally speaking, you've got nearly 2/3 of people saying they've heard a lot about it. The public feels like they know about it. They've heard about it. They've been informed on the issue. Yeah. Which leads us to this question. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of critical race theory? Didn't seek to define it, didn't put any additional words on it, just do you like it or not? 46.1% have an unfavorable opinion, 29.7% have a favorable opinion, 12.0% have no opinion, 3.7% say they've never heard of it, and 8.5% are unsure. Now remember, 7.3% say they've heard nothing at all about it, and then 3.7% say they've never heard of it. Now, which is it? Half the people here say they've never heard of it compared to 7.3% say nothing at all. It's interesting. Anyway, What do you think, Dr. Cooper?
So you don't need to flip back for it, but just trust me on that. Hopefully you'll trust me. The crosstabs on the previous one, have you heard about it? Showed very, very little difference, right? So it seemed like around 2/3 of people, regardless of your all these different categories, had heard of it. So the conversation is getting through whether you're Democrat or Republican, unaffiliated, male, female, race, income, whatever. Clearly, we're starting to see a lot more division here when it comes to what is your opinion of it, right? So everybody's hearing about it, everybody's swimming in the same pond, but then you start to see, of course, huge partisan division here. So the unfavorable Democrats, I'm trying to find the unfavorable Democrat is 15%, whereas so these are kind of the people that don't categorize the way you would think they would. So unfavorable Dems, 15%. Just 5% of Republicans are favorable. So clear partisan division. That's kind of my question that we can't answer today is, I wonder if Parents' Bill of Rights is soon going to become that kind of bifurcated on partisanship.
Right. And if this was an electoral question, we would talk about the enthusiasm gap and that sort of thing, but you see 41.5% say that they are strongly unfavorable compared to 21.1% that are strongly favorable critical race theory. To put it another way, in partisan terms, 78% of Republicans say that they're unfavorable compared to just 52% of Democrats that say that they are favorable. There is an enthusiasm against critical race theory that is much larger than in being in favor of it. Of course, the left has been confused, right? And I'm saying this as president of the John Locke Foundation, the left's answer to critical race theory has been, critical race theory doesn't exist and it's not being taught in schools. But if it was taught in schools and did exist, it would be great. Now, which is it? You can't have it, you can do one or the other. And so it's been confused. It's been confused on their part.
I'm going to let him out on that limb, and he can direct it all that way on that one. Yeah. But I think you actually do have a question, right, in a minute about another CRT question that gets at some of that, right?
We do. Do you believe critical race theory is currently being taught in schools in your community? 27.5% say yes, 37.3% say no, and 35.2% are unsure. That's pretty, I mean, it's not exactly 33.3% all the way around, but it's in the ballpark.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting question, right? So I've seen a lot of, we've seen the question about awareness get pulled a lot, about opinions on it. I haven't seen specifically in schools get pulled a lot. So I thought this was a particularly interesting question, a particularly interesting and divisive in some way result.
Stole this question from the Economist YouGov poll, which is the one national poll I look at every week. It comes out every Wednesday if you want to watch it, because I just want to track it. Stole this question from them, and nationally they do 1,500 U.S. adults, not voters, every week. And it broke down almost exactly the same way here. It was third. It's
really interesting.
Let's talk about guns, also non-controversial. I said before, and I'll say again, this poll went out in the field over the weekend, so this was before the shooting in Texas. Voters who answered these next 3 questions were not influenced by that event in any way. So take that for what it's worth. I don't know how it would have influenced them, but it didn't influence them. We asked, do you generally feel that gun laws in North Carolina need to be more restrictive, less restrictive, or should they stay about the same? This number did surprise me. 42.3% said that it should be more restrictive. 18.9% said it should be less restrictive. 33.8% said it should stay about the same. Now, I'm going to have a bunch of gun groups and people who like the Locke Foundation that are very much pro-gun come after me and say that I ran a liberal poll. Remember, this is the same poll that had generic Republicans up by 7-8 points. It had Ted Budd winning, and these same people who are going to vote for Republicans in Congress and this legislature, are 42.3% of them are saying that gun laws in North Carolina should be more restrictive.
It surprised me as well. I didn't expect to see this kind of number. Again, I didn't expect the headline, John Locke poll good for gun control advocates, but that may be the headline that we get to see.
We're the gift that keeps on giving for gun groups. No, I'm kidding. I was seriously surprised to see this.
I was too.
But this is where we get into, voters are pretty nuanced or confused or both. Because next we asked, federal law requires background checks for gun sales through licensed firearm dealers. Knowing that, do you support or oppose North Carolina's policy of a separate pistol permit process to purchase a handgun? If you want to purchase the gun, you still have to get a background check, and then you have to go to your county sheriff and get a permit from the sheriff in order to own the handgun. That's an additional step that not many people have, or that not many states have. 53.7% said that they support this, 27.2% said they oppose this, 9.910% said neither, 9.2% said unsure.
Yeah, that's right. So this was another one that surprised me. And just when y'all think you know where this is going, we're going to see a slide in a second that's going to hopefully we're all going to do head scratching together.
That's right. There's partisan differences here a little bit that you would expect. Republicans, though, were more split than I thought. Within the margin of error, 43% of Republicans support the pistol permit process. 40% of Republicans oppose the pistol permit process. All right. Would you support or oppose an amendment to the North Carolina Constitution which states any person who is not otherwise prohibited from doing so, say that 5 times fast, or state law, by federal or state law, may openly carry a weapon and may communicate to another person the fact that the person has a weapon? This is an open carry, constitutional carry, however you would like to phrase it. I pulled this language directly from the Montana State Constitution. This is something that is in place in a state in the nation. 45.2% said they would support it, 34.6% would oppose it, 11.6% are unsure, which is understandable, and 8.6% or would say neither. 8.6% said unsure. Now remember, gun laws need to be more restrictive, says the Plurality. Plurality also says they would support open carry. What's that mean?
Cue the head scratch, right? The collective head scratch here. You have actually a hypothesis that I like a lot that hopefully you'll talk about in a second, and I won't steal it from you. But I do think it's interesting and a little bit surprising. I wonder as we're looking at it, and this is, I think it's a really good question, again, taken directly from a real, what is actually in Montana, but the and here. I do wonder, and there's no way to get at this question, but if you're agreeing to this, which side of that sentence are you agreeing with, right? So it's got a little bit of this double-barreled nature to it, but that's also exactly, as you pointed out, how the Montana Constitution reads. But maybe you can share your sort of hypothesis about kind of how this plays out.
Now, remember the wording on this is openly carry a weapon.
Yes.
Which means I'm going to have a holster and a 6-shooter and I'm walking down Fayetteville Street. 45.2% of people are cool with this. But gun laws need to be more restrictive. This is a hypothesis. I have no way of knowing this. My guess is that, and again, we're not seeing majorities anywhere except for right there on support for the pistol permit process. But you're seeing 42.3%, 45.2%. They're not majorities. My guess is that a lot of voters are somewhere in that they are more concerned about the vetting process for who owns a gun. And once they've gone through that vetting process, they don't care what they do with the gun. If you've been vetted and been shown to be, it's okay that you own one, sure, openly carry. I don't care, wide earp, go to it. That's my guess, but I don't really know.
Yeah, it's as plausible as anything else. I think also we got to remember this is still fewer than half, because of the neither and the unsure, is fewer than half support. So it's not that the majority of people are saying, let's wide earp it up, but the plurality are. And
right.
So, yeah, I think this is one I'd be really curious to see how this tracks in the future, how this poll compares to other polls on those same questions. This is also, if I remember right, one of the only questions in these sections that talk about North Carolina in particular, right? Because the abortion ones were more about states in general.
That's right.
And so that's just something else to note.
All right, we have reached the Q&A section of our poll presentation. The poll is now online on our website. If you ever want to look at this poll or any other poll we've ever done, you can go to johnlocke.org, click on the polls tab, and it'll take you right to it. You'll pull up this poll and you can look at all the cross lines or cross tabs and top lines. Again, I messed that one up nicely. But we're happy to take questions from the audience. Joe. I can, but I'll have to get to you because we haven't done any gun questions since I've came into Civitas back in January of 2018. Yeah, it has been a while. I know that Civitas poll has done gun questions in the past, but I'd have to look that up and get it to you, which I'm happy to do. We still have the database and all of that, but I don't have an answer off the top of my head. Other question? Oh, I see Skip thinking.
And I can't read the figures up there. I'll have to read it off the
Sure.
thing. But I've seen the 100 polls on abortion,
Mm.
and it's basically what the question you asked. So,
Mm.
for example, North Carolina has about 30,000 abortions a year.
Mm-hmm.
If the pro-choice people had all their wishes, it would be about 35,000 a year.
Mm.
If the pro-life people had all their wishes, it'd be about 500 a year. But if you go to look and see the actual what restrictions people want,
Mm-hmm.
the majority does not agree with North Carolina's law today, nor which allows abortion up to birth.
Mm.
I mean, there are few restrictions on funding,
Right.
but if you actually look at specifically what they want,
Right.
it's very different than pro-choice or pro-life.
It is. Voters are very nuanced on that. I guess when I was saying state law right now, if Roe was overturned, I was talking about a 20-week ban, which I thought was,
Well,
well,
20-week ban may come back
sure.
if Roe versus Wade is overruled because of a court decision.
Right.
But that only affects, let's say, of the 35,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that would only affect 1,000
Mm-hmm.
abortions a year. So
Right.
if you're saying, oh, we got it down to 20 weeks, yeah, you've solved, 1/30th of the problem.
Yeah. This is one of those issues that has been debated for so long and so heavily by every family in America, right? Voters are incredibly nuanced on it. And so to your point, you almost have to pull the individual policies.
Yes, they're nuanced on what they want, but they're completely ignorant of what state law is.
Right. Yeah, because we talk about it in terms of federal government. Let me give them to Andy and I'll come back to Joe.
I'd love to talk about the gun and abortion stuff, but I think it's maybe a bit too complicated for 10 minutes. But because I think some of the questions are really interesting, what you've got out is interesting. But let me do a simpler one. The findings from the survey are a little clearer on this. What you brought it up, but you didn't explain the difference. So what do you make of this difference, this fall off of Bud from the congressional Republican, the generic congressional ballot and the generic state legislative ballot for Republicans? Is it because of his clear connection to Trump? Is it because of Beasley herself? You guys, I mean, I'm sort of speculating.
Yeah.
As I ask the question, but I think it's an interesting observation that the polls made, and I wonder what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't have any data on it, so it's all speculation. But I think, yeah, maybe, and I wouldn't have said this a month ago, but maybe Trump's star is fading a bit, and that as we move into this general election environment, whatever happened in Georgia, I don't want to overinterpret one state, but still, I think something important happened there, that maybe that is taking the edge off of Bud a little bit. I wonder, and again, total speculation, if maybe there is also a little bit of a backlash from Bud not debating. I mean, obviously, look, we know who won and who lost and by what margin, but those critiques of Bud seem to stick to me. And that people that I talked to still who voted for Bud said, man, I wish he had gotten out there and debated. I wish he had been out a little bit more. I wish he had been a little more public. So I wonder if that's part of it. Maybe if that's the case, look, those voters are going to come around the Ted Bud in the end, clearly. But maybe they're just sort of sanctioning a little bit at this midterm point. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I think your second point rings true to me. It doesn't account for all of it, but I'll point out, so in this question on the U.S. Senate race particularly, Republicans, 87% of Republicans say they're going to vote for Ted Bud. But if you go back to the generic congressional ballot, 94% of Republicans say they're going to vote for the generic Republican. And I'm wondering if some people, this is right after the primary, right? And I'm wondering if some people are still just smarting from the primary. There were some hardcore McCrory voters, hardcore Walker voters, and I'm wondering if they're just not just a little bitter about it. My guess is that number might change as we go through the summer, but that wound's still a little fresh for some people. I don't really know. That's just a good guess.
That's a good.
A lot of the national polls, there's been increasing gap between the generic Republican brand and Trump himself.
Yeah.
So I just wondered whether that,
Yeah. I don't think it was the George Soros ad against Bud. I just don't think that was plausible. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
Regarding some of your couple of the earlier slides about sort of people's feelings on the trending direction of the country and the president's job approval regarding the Democrats in particular, I'd be really interested to see out of those Democrats that are unsatisfied with his performance, if they're thinking he's either governing too progressively or not progressively enough. What sort of that
Right.
might look like.
Right, and that's the problem we always have with clicker work better with the job approval rating questions or the trend questions of right track, wrong track, do you approve or disapprove? It doesn't really get into the nuance because it just gives you an overall view. The entry numbers are following the trends on this, but yeah, I don't know what it is, or are some of them just stunned about how the agenda is playing out economically? I don't know. It could be a lot of union workers who just don't want to pay $5 a gallon in gas. I was in California last week. I saw 603. I mean, even in Southern California, that's not popular.
Hey, Donald, can you also repeat the audience questions from the online audience?
I'm sorry. The question that we just got in, thank you for reminding me that, the question that we just got was for Democrats and liberals that think the country's off on the wrong track or maybe disapprove of President Biden's the job that he's doing. Why do we know why that they disapprove or they are pessimistic about the direction of the country? I just speculated a lot about that, but I don't know if Dr. Cooper has thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are it's a really good question. I think those are two different questions. I mean, this right track, wrong track, and Dems are split 50-50. And so if you ask me, is the country off to a right track or wrong track, I might not even go to politicians. I might not even go to government, right? Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm upset that the Braves aren't doing better this year. I don't know. But it's the right question to ask, but it's a generic mood question. And then I think the other one, when it gets to Biden's approval rating, clearly is actually tapping into that. So I think there's a lot in the black box we don't know, particularly with the right track, wrong track questions, because it's just, we don't know what people are thinking about.
Yeah. Joe, you had another question.
Yeah, you didn't ask these questions, and generally speaking, the generic ballot's probably the best indicator of the significance of the wave, the
Sure.
dynamic of the wave predicted by that one question. But any of these issue-specific questions, anything in the results you see that might be influencing relative voter enthusiasm or a greater disposition of voters to turn out and vote in this election as a result of guns, abortion, or education?
Yeah, I don't think there was anything that I'm remembering that tapped into enthusiasm or asked people to rank salience of issues or anything. It was sort of, are you aware? I mean, the structure was generally, are you aware? What do you think about it? I guess with abortion, you asked that one question about would this be a single issue that you would vote on? But I don't know. And, like particularly with the CRT question, I mean, it's one thing to say, this is what Americans think in general. Is that something that's actually going to influence turnout? I just don't know. I don't think we know from these data, but it's a great point.
I don't think we know that from previous Civitas polls, and you can look at national polls are saying the same thing. To hear your question top of mind is inflation. Based off of these results, I don't think that Roe is giving, or the Dobbs decision, or Roe v. Wade, whatever we want to call that issue, I don't think it's going to give Democrats the bounce that they necessarily want it to give them. But if you look at national polls, people are saying that inflation is a bigger issue than unemployment. It's top of mind. We ask them about, when they go to the ballot box, it's coming above jobs in the economy. It's coming in above guns. It's coming in above foreign policy. Inflation is right now the big issue. But if you go back to May of 2020, nobody was saying Black Lives Matter and riots was the top issue either. It ended up being a big thing. So it's still early in the election year.
Inflation and gas prices.
Yeah.
A lot of politicians, they claim, especially presidents and governors, claim credit for good things, and they get the blame for things they have nothing to do with. And I just would caution that inflation and gas prices are not really under anybody's direct control, and that could backfire on you. And plus, it's very difficult to sort out the causes of the inflation. Was it the American Rescue Plan a year ago? Or was it the the plan, the Trump plan 2 months earlier
Right.
that did the same thing. You know, you just,
Or was it factories shutting down because people had COVID and creating resource scarcity? I mean, and the truth is, it's a perfect storm of all of this, right? What? Yeah, yeah. Other questions? Yes, sir.
In terms of the gun questions, to move to less controversial. So the poll was done less than 10 days after the Buffalo shooting.
Yeah.
How do you guys believe that influenced it? In terms of the varying responses of, yes, more gun restrictions, but go ahead and open carry.
The question was, how do we think, so this was done before the Texas shooting, but after the shooting in Buffalo, how do we think that shooting influenced people's reactions on this question? I mean, I don't know. There might have been a bounce in the more restrictive on this. I don't really know. What do you think?
My guess is a little bit, but yeah, my guess is a little bit of a bounce. The question is, right, is it a bounce or a bump, right? So bounces come back down, bumps stay up. And I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. What I'm trying to figure out in terms of public opinion on gun control is this a bounce or is this a bump? And so what happened, when the shootings in Texas start to fade from memory a little bit, they're a little bit less salient. Do opinions still hang at the same place? And I don't know. I think it's something to watch. It's a really good question.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to guess, if we did the same poll again today, I'm guessing this goes up 4 points and the stay about the same goes down 4 points. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Other questions? How are we doing on time? Oh, we're right at 1 o'clock.
Hey.
One more from John Guzay.
Just quickly, still the case though, it's chart that more people either want them to be less restrictive or stay the same. In other words, there's more support on the pro-gun side than the more restrictive side.
That's true. You add this, and John Guzay's point was that if you put the less restrictive and stay about the same together, that gets you to a majority, which means that there's more support for either less restrictive or keeping them the same than there is for adding more gun restrictions.
Well,
or you could read it the other way too.
Yeah, right around the same. I mean, I think your point's a good one, right? These are not, that they're not equally different. Although 19 plus, I'm trying to do this on the fly, right? So you're going to be well within the margin of error, so right around the same. But I agree that the magnitude of it shifts depending on your interpretation of that.
Yeah, it does. All right, thank you so much. We'll do another poll presentation next month. I can't swear that it's going to be here, but we'll email you about it and let you know. But we'll be a live in-person poll presentation somewhere. I guess we'll be like the Van Gogh exhibit in Raleigh. We're coming, just not telling you where. But thank you for joining us. Again, if you want the poll results, you can go to johnlocke.org. If you want to look at the poll presentation again, you can find it on our Facebook